because there's a dumbing down of content, you also have a fall in terms of credibility of the medium. Because there's a fall in credibility of the media, fewer people are buying it.
The mainstream media in South Africa is suffering from a crisis of credibility. How do we gain access to trustworthy sources of information in this environment? I posed this question to Kanthan Pillay on a recent episode of my podcast. What follows is a short extract from our longer conversation. If you would like to watch the full discussion with Kanthan Pillay, that's linked in the description below. Enjoy. But how have you seen the South African media landscape changing over the period of your career, Kanthan? Because I think if we survey the media landscape at the moment, I see ETV, your alma mater, has just announced some significant retrenchments. And that's a familiar story across many media houses. Newsrooms are getting smaller and juniorized as well. So what are some of the trends that you've observed?
Look, let's actually just go back to, kind of the 94 period, which is when I pitched up again in the country. And if you look at the time, the Argus company, which I rejoined, was a fairly solid, well, actually, there were two fairly solid and dependable newspaper groups in the country at the time. So the Argus company was one of them, and the Argus company pretty much owned the market for the afternoon newspapers. So at that time, the Star used to be an afternoon paper, and there was the Daily News in Durban and the Argus in Cape Town. And the other large group was SA Associated Newspapers, which became Times Media Limited, which became Avusa, which became, I forget what the guys are called these days, but they generally handled what was called the morning group of newspapers. So it was the Cape Times, there was the Eastern Province Herald, there was the Mercury in Durban, and of course, a couple of decades before, there was the Round Daily Mail, and the Round Daily Mail had been shut down, and the supplement of the Round Daily Mail, which was Business Day, then became the mainstream paper. And, there was trade-offs that took place with the government at the time. But the fact of the matter is that in 1994, we had a very solid and dependable print media structure in the country. Look, I mean, the Afrikaans press, for that matter, titles like Report and Beeld and Die Burger were also rock-solid publications, all, quite dependable. Obviously, they all had their own political allegiances to some extent. But by and large, the groups at the time stuck to the basics of journalism. And one could generally trust the type of reporting that was coming out. So we didn't really see disinformation. You would see censorship by omission, which is, every publication in the world does that in terms of the choices that you make around what you choose to cover. But the type of reporting that you would end up getting was solid because you had journalists who were well-trained, they were well-mentored within the newsroom. Then we had Tony O'Reilly from Independent Newspapers UK, who then pitched up and bought out the Argus company. And he bought it, as I recall at the time, for the princely sum of 80 million rand. And his business model, basically, in almost every business that he had been in, was to cost cut. So, for example, he used to run Heinz Ketchup years before. And the way in which he very quickly upped the profitability of Heinz Ketchup was by removing the label from the back of the bottle, which meant that there was significant cost savings that were incurred. And all of the stuff that was previously printed on the back of the bottle label, he now printed on the inside of the front bottle label. So, you'd have to drink your way through the bottle of ketchup before you could see what it was. That was essentially his business model, cost-cutting things to profitability. And he brought that business model into the newspaper business. And that actually started a trend that persists to this day, where essentially what you do is every time you lose a high-cost asset, and in this case, a high-cost asset would be a valuable journalist. You don't replace that person at the same level, you replace that person at a vastly junior level. And so you've had this constant dumbing down of content that has happened over the time. But the overall impact of that has been that because there's a dumbing down of content, you also have a fall in terms of credibility of the medium. Because there's a fall in credibility of the media, fewer people are buying it. And because fewer people are buying it, the advertising revenue goes down. And because the advertising revenue goes down, they get into cost cutting yet again. And so it's kind of lather, rinse, repeat. And that has pretty much been the process ever since we became a free country in 1994. Now take that exactly the same business model and now apply it to almost every other institution that used to be responsible for producing news. Of course, the SABC has always been the biggest of the lot, but SABC, through years of chronic mismanagement, where you've essentially depleted resources that would go into producing actual content and rather redistributed that into resources that effectively went into enriching executives. And, we know the story around, how all of that occurred. So the SABC, which really should have been the BBC of Africa, ended up pretty much constantly degrading its own resources. The thing that you mentioned right now in terms of ETV, actually ETV by itself is still doing extremely well. It's ENCA that has taken a bit of a pounding. And the reason why ENCA has taken a pounding, if you take a look at the broad brushstrokes, is because DSTV, which is essentially responsible for carrying ENCA, has been hemorrhaging subscribers for quite a while. And so correspondingly with those hemorrhaging of those subscribers, particularly at the upper end of the market, because remember that ENCA was a premium channel, which meant that you had to be on the highest tier to get that. Now, what we've had is, because of competition from the likes of, we've got Netflix, we've got Amazon Prime, we've got Apple TV, we've now got Disney Plus coming into the country as well. The fact is that you can actually subscribe to all of those at the same time for a lower price than paying for a DSTV premium subscription. So it's unsurprising that you've had this net depletion of resources that has gone into the media.
Okay, so those are some of the financial pressures, but there's also been a brain drain in the media where skilled senior practitioners have left the profession to join PR firms or advertising agencies or to work with government, for example. How is that affecting the industry?
Well, I think you've nailed it. That's actually a significant chunk, because you consider what the average salary is right now and let's hone in on the print media right now, because broadcast is a different category. My understanding is that the current salary for an editor in the independent media group is now down to less than 500,000 Rand a year. Consider that is significantly lower down from where it was in the pre-COVID era, at which time it was sitting at around about 1 million. So effectively, I think the editors have taken roughly a 50% cut in pay, and that's money that's not going to go back. Now, that's the type of money that you could effortlessly double by going into the private sector in a PR capacity. And in fact, one of the biggest sources of the brain drain of intellectual capital from the media has not been into the private sector. It has actually been particularly Black journalists who've been taken from the media and put into government, because government, of course, doesn't have to make a profit and they can afford to pay massively inflated salaries. So if you happen to be what they refer to as an MLA, Ministerial Liaison Officer, you will effectively make up about 4 to 5 times as much money as you'll be making as a newspaper editor. So why on earth would you want to be sweating bullets working in an industry that's basically on a downward spiral in terms of revenue, when you could be hopping across and earning far more money? So yes, public relations has been a big source of the drain, but public relations has generally pulled among the most competent people from journalism. Whereas if you look in terms of the people who've gone into government, they've generally just been because of the fact that government wants to have press people who are able to issue statements for them and that type of thing. Some of them have been good over the years, and others of them have been, shall we say, less than helpful in terms of actually giving us a picture of what goes on in government.
Thanks for watching. Please do leave your thoughts down in the comments section. Also, if you would like to check out the full discussion with Kanthan Pillay, that's linked over here. You can also subscribe to my other channel that's linked over here. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, take care.